Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Stephen King Cast, one man's musings on the works of Stephen King. Each week I will review one entry in the bibliography of Stephen King in the chronological order of publication, and what I am doing this week, I am continuing my thoughts on the 2017 adaptation of Stephen King's 1986 masterpiece, It.
So, unless you've been living in a sewer over the last couple weeks, we now have on our hands a massive, giant, successful blockbuster adaptation of a Stephen King story. It's all everyone's been talking about. And just as we transition from September's It towards October's Stranger Things Season 2, it has become apparent that these last 2 years, there has been a winner of the year, and that has been Finn Wolfhard. Finn Wolfhard won 2016, the summer of 2016, and he definitely won the summer of 2017, and is about to win the fall of 2017. So the trajectory that this kid is going, I just wonder what he has in store for round 3 next year. What is going to happen in 2018? But I'm sure that Finn Wolfhard is going to bring it hard. Anyway, guys, so why am I re-reviewing it? Because if you didn't listen to last week's episode, I saw it in the drive-in, and it was a great experience. You can go and listen, and I think that my review is actually pretty thorough, but it is limited with what I was able to talk about because the drive-in does not provide the best visual experience. I couldn't really comment on the effectiveness of the cinematography or the special effects. And by the end of the movie, I was very distracted by all the external stimuli around the screen itself that I couldn't really comment too much on the ending of the movie. So if you haven't listened to last week's episode, go give it a listen to. I do express a lot of thoughts, and I heap a lot of praise on the movie. But this past week, I was able to go back into a theater, a regular theater, in the dark, and was able to experience it, not in my car, not distracted by a rising moon above the screen or people walking back and forth. I was just able to get the normal cinematic experience, and so I'll be able to share the thoughts that I wasn't able to share the first time around. So I believe that I'll get some closure. And one thing that's really neat about seeing it, we are now 2 weeks out since the premiere, since it came out, and smashed records and everything. Now 2 weeks out, I saw it on a Friday night. The theater was packed. There was not an empty seat at all, which is great. And not only is it great, and not only is that notable because this movie now has legs and in the society, but in what we live in now, the world in which we live, in terms of cinema and blockbusters, it's very rare that couple days after a movie that a theater will be sold out, or that it continues to have legs, but this one does. And not only is that, like I said, notable, but also geographically from where I live right now, there is a very big fair that occurs once a year in my area that will draw people away from other activities that they would otherwise go to on a Friday night, such as the movies. So for this fair to be in full swing, and it's a really big attraction. It really is. It sounds very hokey, but it actually is a pretty big attraction for this area. For this fair to be going and for it to be sold out. Again, that's really awesome, and it shows that there's a lot of strength in this movie. And there's people I was sitting to, I was actually talking to, and they were really nice, and they hadn't seen it yet, and they definitely enjoyed it. The people on my other side, they definitely enjoyed it. So everyone was giggling in the theater. It was just, everyone loved it. People that saw it for the first time, people I'm sure were going again for the second time, like myself. Everyone loved it. So I'll definitely be able to share my thoughts, but I'm actually kind of getting ahead of myself here. But what I wanted to do before I got any further in my second review of it, I of course wanted to discuss just some shameless plugs. So I Got a Instagram message from Matt over at ka-tet19.net, and he's got some big news coming, guys. Some exciting news. So I don't know if you follow him on Instagram or Twitter, but I would head on over there. You might be able to get some clues as to what he might have in store next. But I am very excited for his next batch of shirts, and I will definitely keep you updated. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, ka-tet19.net is a very stylish and creative and loving tribute to Stephen King. So if you want to, I'm currently wearing the Ka symbol right now, the Ka symbol t-shirt. So if you love Stephen King and you love t-shirts, then ka-tet19.net is the place for you to be. And Matt has some pretty cool stuff coming that is not Dark Tower related, and I'm very, very excited, and I'm sure that you will be as well. Also, if you haven't done so already, check Josh's website, One for the Road. Go on over to One for the Road 2018. If you guys listened to my interview with Josh earlier this summer, this guy's got the goods, man. He has a vision. He is a Stephen King fan. He's one of us, and he's making a movie, and he is adapting Night Shift's story, One for the Road, which puts us in a world in a post-Salem's Lot, Maine. So check it out, and if you have a couple bucks, throw it his way, and you will help fund a Stephen King movie. So if you were disappointed with The Dark Tower and wish that you had a say, and wish that you were able to contribute in some way, then you can rectify that by heading on over to onefortheroad2018.com, and you'll be able to help make a Stephen King movie. Speaking of Stephen King movies, we have two, not just it, but we have two that are very, very close. As I am recording this, it is September 23rd, so in 6 days, in less than 1 week. So on Friday, Thursday night at midnight, our next Stephen King movie will arrive to your tablets, to your computers, to your game consoles, to your smart TVs, to your Apple TVs, to your televisions on Netflix. However you want to watch Netflix, it will be coming there, and that is Gerald's Game. So if you guys liked the movies Oculus or Hush, the writer-director, who is really, really good. When I saw Hush, I said, I think I tweeted it out, I said, well, there's no reason now why anyone needs to make a Gerald's Game movie. And then lo and behold, the director of Hush immediately announced that he was making a Gerald's Game movie, and it looks really good. This is a movie that I was never sure, this is a property that I was never sure could actually be made into a movie because it is so internal. It is just Jessie's story, and you're in her mind the entire time, and just the way that a movie works, you are always outside of the character. I just never thought that it would work. Based on the trailer, it looks like it's going to work. First of all, it looks beautiful. Just the establishing shots, the way that the eclipse looks, it looks great. And I'm very excited to see how this one turns out. Oculus was fun. Hush was great. So there is a lot of talent on display here. And so I will definitely review. I can't say that I'll be able to review it next weekend, but I will definitely review Gerald's Game when it comes out. Also, coming to Netflix 1 month after that, on October 20th, is the novella 1922, which was included in the Full Dark No Stars collection, which was what was that? 2008, 2009. It is a dark bunch of stories. Really, really good, and 1922 is a very, very effective novella about a marriage. It's a really good companion piece to A Good Marriage, and it is dark. It is a dark. All of the stories are dark in that collection, but this one is pretty bleak, and it stars Stephen King alum Tom Jane. Tom, I Just Want My Kids Back Jane, who stars as the main character. Spoiler alert, he kills his wife, and takes place, spoiler alert, in 1922 on a farm. And again, this looks good. This looks, just cinematically speaking, there are some great establishing shots of the farmland, and I'm very excited to see what this has in store. So for the end of September into October, we get the 1-2 punch of Gerald's Game in 1922. Both, if you think about it, two pretty screwed up views on marriage. Coming your way, and then the week after that, also on Netflix, we have Stranger Things season 2. So it's a very, very exciting time for horror fans, Stephen King fans, and Netflix fans. So I will definitely review Gerald's Game 1922 and Stranger Things season 2 when they come out. So with all of that said, guys, I am going to head into my thoughts about it that I wasn't able to get to the first time around. And I'm going to follow when I'm done with that. It's not going to take that long. And when I'm done with that, I'm going to share your thoughts because I really wanted your thoughts on it. And many of you wrote in at stephenkingcast@yahoo.com, and it's really important that you guys continue to do that. And a lot of you have a lot of thoughts out there on the movie, the effectiveness on the movie, what you liked about the movie, what you didn't like about the movie. So when I'm done finishing my thoughts on it, I'm going to share your thoughts on it. So make sure that you stick around to hear all of other constant readers, constant listeners, the members of our larger Losers Club, our larger quartet, what they think about Stephen King's latest adaptation. So I definitely talked about the kids last week, but let me talk about how we meet the kids. The way that Andy Muscietti directed our introduction to the Losers Club it really could be the highlight of the movie. It is a masterful, lively introduction to each of our characters, all very naturalistic. By this point, we've already met Bill when we met Georgie. But now we see him with his peers in the hallways. He's there with his friends, Richie and Stan and Eddie. So last week, like I said, I heaped praises on these kids. I will never miss an opportunity to just shower these kids with just accolades because they make this movie, and I think this is the reason why the movie is being talked about, why it is successful, why it's sticking with people, because you have to buy the Losers Club, and you certainly do here. It's these young actors. It's everything to do with these young actors, and here four of them just come bursting right out of the scene. I mean, the everything about it, their rhythm is natural. Their banter, it isn't forced. All of it, it just works so well. And Muscietti is behind them, directing them to perfection. He is leading them literally through the hallways with his camera direction. He has coached them on how to interact with each other, and it all makes for one of Stephen King's most notable adaptations. And as we are introduced to them as a core, we follow them through the hallway, and as we follow them through the hallway, the scene is electric. I mean, we meet other notable characters, including Henry, Patrick, Victor, Belch. We meet Mr. Keen's daughter, who then brings us to our next loser, Bev. And Bev, like I talked about last week, she is the scene stealer. She is just operating on her own level, and her introduction is very much like the character itself. It's at its own level. It is quick. It's to the point. We realize very, very early on, in a moment, that she is a loner. She's an outcast, and she endures. There is a resilience to her. There's a strength to this character that defined her literary counterpart that was missing. And nothing against the actress in the 1990 TV miniseries, but she wasn't written the way that I think many of us found Bev to truly be. It wasn't Bev. It really wasn't Bev. And Sophia Lillis is Bev. And, her readiness in this scene when she's in the stall and her ingenuity to hold up her bag. Either, to me, it demonstrates a quick-thinking mind or a Batman-styled level of preparation to just be ready for all occurrences, no matter what. Either way, it's just a great way to show what type of character that Bev is. And then, when we meet Ben, it's fun. I mean, your heart breaks for the kid. The first time I saw it, I was so caught up in the charm of the moment. I mean, it's a very charming scene, and it's funny. I mean, it's the introduction to the New Kids on the Block running joke, and the second time around, I saw the heartbreak in Ben and the vulnerability in Ben, and I know that I wasn't down on the actor. It wasn't the actor. It's just I felt that the character in what I reviewed last week, that he isn't given as much to do. I still agree with that, but it isn't. It isn't the actor's fault. In fact, I think that he is a great Ben, and I wish that he was given more to do. I think that the character suffers. He disappears for large chunks of the movie and doesn't impact the narrative the way that his literary counterpart did. Not as bad as Mike does. I'm going to get to Mike later on, but Ben, I really focused this time around, knowing that the jokes were coming. I could kind of cut away that, and I could just watch just the way that he looks at Bev, and just knowing that he's so vulnerable and so fragile and so kind. So I enjoyed Ben a lot more the second time around. So the kids are great. Kids are fantastic, and whatever actors they get to fill their adult counterpart roles, they're going to have some pretty big shoes to fill, and it's going to be good to see the kid actors back again in some flashback scenes, and I'll talk about what those flashback scenes might be later on, because it has everything to do with the ending, and I'll talk about the ending later on as well. Now, the kids are great. Don't get me wrong. I like I said, I talked about the kids last week. A couple things I did not talk about last week are some influences here that I definitely spotted this time around. And what I found while watching this this time around in the theater, clearly Spielberg is on display, and you can't make a movie set in the 1980s in a small city / suburbs without invoking Amblin. And that was one of the reasons why I loved the change from the 1950s to the 1980s, because it was still going to be able to invoke similar sensibilities that had been found in Amblin films. But it isn't just beholden to Spielberg the way that Stranger Things is. But Stranger Things is kind of its own thing too. It's very Stephen King, whatever. But or I guess a better argument would be it isn't beholden to Amblin or Spielberg the way that Super 8 was. This really does kind of feel like its own thing at times. But whenever you do get kids on bikes riding through the streets like wild furies, the way that they fan out on their bikes, like a pack of birds, like fighter jets, it definitely will always invoke Amblin, as it should, and that's great. And so I think that Muscietti leaned into that, which I think he needed to. I think that was a great choice. And at times the score, I think, swelled in a very John Williams sort of way, which also is a very, very smart move. Now, not only do I feel that it had Spielbergian and John Williams touchstones to it, I also felt that it had Tim Burton and Danny Elfman there at times. I think the horror itself, and I'll talk about the horror and the argument being made around the horror. First of all, people are saying that's not a horror movie, which is ridiculous to me, but the argument of the types of scares and whether or not it is quote-unquote scary, that's a different argument. But there is a playfulness to the fright at times that to me invokes what Tim Burton is all about. And certainly some of the designs in the movie are completely Tim Burton. The house on Neibolt Street looks like something out of a Tim Burton set. When the clown's face towards the end of the movie parts and we see the deadlights for the first time, the mouth opens in such a way that it basically looks like the sandworm from Beetlejuice. So I whether this is unintentional or intentional, I definitely got some Tim Burton touchstones in there that I thought were very effective, because Tim Burton, what I like about him is that he makes spooky fun, and there is a celebratory nature, and I'm going to talk about this when I examine the horror aspect of this, but there's a celebratory nature to to fear that you find in Tim Burton, and I found that on display here, where you just revel in kind of being scared. And the score at time, to me, invoked some Danny Elfman. So I definitely got some Tim Burton and some Spielberg out of there, which I think is fun. Now I want to talk about the adults in the book. We clearly saw that its presence in shaping this land, which ultimately became the village of Derry, the town of Derry, the city of Derry, it poisoned the atmosphere, not unlike the way the Tommyknockers poisoned the air and the inhabitants of was that Haven? Was that Haven, Maine? But here we also get the similar poisoning of the values and the morality and the kindness of our adults. Now, in the books, Stephen King provides some nuance here that not every adult was bad. There was something wrong with Derry. There was always something fundamentally wrong about this city, but not every adult was evil. Not every adult was awful. I mean, we had Officer Nell. There's no Officer Nell figure here. There doesn't need to be. I don't think that we need a cartoon character, Irish cop walking around talking like Banshee from X-Men. But, I mean, we also had Richie's parents who were very kind and just understood their son as much as they could and loved him and provided him the freedom that a wild Richie needed. And one of there's a scene in the book that I'll always love that really speaks to me, that it's in his mom's state of mind through her perspective, and she's reflecting on Richie and her friends and kind of just speaking about childhood at large and how at times he frightened her, that his inability to look for safety just scared her, and that's kind of childhood in a nutshell. And so there was more nuance there than there is in the movie, but at the end of the day, there doesn't need to be that nuance. Muscietti doesn't have to go there. I just kind of wanted to point that out because it works. It makes a very specific and well-argued point that in his movie that he's making here, he presents the friends of childhood and the unfortunate and unfair way that adults ruin the innocence of childhood. That is that sound that you hear is my furry co-host making her presence known, making a mess wherever she goes. So I just wanted to kind of touch upon that. I mean, and I really think that Muscietti does a very, very effective job showing the inhumanity of the adults, whether it be Eddie's mom. In fact, there is a scene after Eddie breaks his arm and she's yelling at the kids. There's a quick shot, and this is why I think that Muscietti... dude's name is like Machete. I never really realized that. That's awesome. Good for him. So Muscietti does a phenomenal job, and this is the reason why I think he deserves so much praise for making this movie be what it is. It's when she's yelling at the Losers Club. Now, this scene has come on the heels of the kids facing off with a legitimate monster, but this scene is so potent and palpable and recognizable that we have our kids facing off with another actual monster, a woman suffering from Munchausen's by proxy. But even if it wasn't that, it is still something that we've all experienced one way or another when we have had to face someone else's angry parent, and how the feeling that you get is... It's a specific feeling that you never encounter at any other point in your life. There is and I don't know if there's a word for it or a term for it, but the feeling of being yelled at by a friend's parent, it is its own emotion, and it is captured in that moment, especially for one split second when it cuts to Eddie in the car crying And he's not crying because his arm is broken. He's not crying because a monster almost killed him or his friends, but because his mother is yelling at his friends. And it is so true. And the fact that Muscietti was able to capture that truth, and he knew to capture that truth, speaks volumes about the thought process that went on in his mind when making that movie. And it's these little moments like that that I believe is making this movie just continue to expand, and not recede into the shadows as a just flash in the pan. It continues to grow because there's legitimate moments of truth and honesty in there that I think are very, very appreciative. I mean, I've already talked about Mr. Keen and how I mean, it is so creepy. And of course, you know, Henry's dad and Bill's dad is not there for his son, and of course, Bev's dad. Watching the movie again, it's just watching Bev's dad scene. It's at the end with him. It is hard to watch. It is really, really hard to watch. It's awful. So I mean, I applaud Muscietti for being able to effectively and I don't know. It's just very. He streamlined it. Like I said, King provides some nuance. He realized he didn't need that nuance. He just cut out the fat and just went straight for this metaphor here, and was able to back up his metaphor with some very strong performances by these adult actors. So everything else that I talked about last week was praise. I need to discuss some issues that I have, because I didn't really have many issues last week, and it's not like I want to talk about issues that I have, but watching it again brought some things to light that I just want to explore here. The first of which is Mike. I know that I talked about this last week, but it only reinforced it more this week. That my concern last week when I reviewed it was that he was by far the weakest member of the Losers Club. I was really hoping that when I went back and watched it, I would see something different, or I wouldn't be disappointed. But my second viewing didn't help. Maybe it's because of all of the characters in the movie, his is the one that is most altered for the screen. He's given this truly horrific and tragic backstory. He isn't the historian of the group. He doesn't have a role in this movie other than to kill Henry. I mean, folks, Mike kills a guy. I mean, that is really messed up. I mean, it is one thing to kill a monster. That still lies in the realm of childhood possibility. But the murder of a human being, that is something different. That's a heavy weight on a child. And I get it. It's in self-defense. But, I mean, I have a feeling that it would completely break a kid if he killed someone else. Not a monster, not a werewolf, not a painting monster, not a headless Easter egg hunt victim, not a Georgie ghost, not hair from a drain, not a leper monster, but an actual human being. I think that it would completely break Mike. I mean, at the very least, even if it break him, even if he wasn't curled up in a corner crying because he took someone else's life, I think that it would have an impact. I mean, Stan, look at Stan. And Muscietti, again, like, I don't even like criticizing this movie because the guy was on fire making this movie, but he knew when he needed to show the effect of being attacked by this creature and the effect that it would have on a child. So when Stan is being sucked on, like his face is being sucked on by the creature, it is a very disturbing moment. He is violated. He is violated in that moment by it. And we see him react to that. He has a very emotional and honest and deep reaction to it that is going to carry this character into the next movie. Knowing where his arc takes him, you can see that this is where the crack forms, that's going to ultimately, spoiler alert, seriously, if you don't want to know what happens to Stan, but spoiler alert, here we go. I mean, Stan kills himself, and you can tell that this is the moment where he dies in this moment. It's just 30 years later, it's going to actually happen, but it is because of this moment. And so, I mean, Muscietti knows to spend some time, and you don't need a lot of time, but enough time to actually see what happens with this character. There's an emotional fallout from something that happens to him, and there's no emotional fallout with Mike after killing a kid. And yeah, I get it. I mean, Henry was awful, and Henry was taunting him, and Henry was a bully, and Henry said that he wished that he burned his parents alive. And yeah, that all of that is awful. So maybe you could make the argument that Mike wouldn't care, but I don't think that a 13-year-old kid can kill another kid, regardless of how monstrous or horrific that other kid is, without having some sort of emotional ramifications. Now, with all of that said, all of my arguments could be completely moot, because this is only one of a two-part chapter, right? And based on Muscietti's interviews, Mike is going to be a central figure. Anyone that's read the books will know this. Anyone that's read the book knows Mike's role in the adult story. Mike stays behind, and there is a poignancy there that the kid that thinks that he's the outsider becomes the ultimate insider, the ultimate part of Derry itself, by being the only one that stays behind to watch after Derry. So my issues could be completely moot, because we could get that character filled in a lot more in the sequel, and have these moments matter so much more. So one of the things that Muscietti has discussed is that Mike is going to be almost, I don't know if the word unrecognizable is apt, but the Mike that we knew from the books was not weary, weathered. He's kind of like he's a lighthouse keeper, So imagine, just nature taking its toll on him. He's been beaten down, but he's also a very, very strong and resilient guy, very stoic, watching over this town and keeping tabs. There's a lot of strength and a lot of heroism to him. The Mike in the sequel, in the movie, doesn't look like he's going to be just that. Muscietti said that he is going to have addiction problems, and maybe those addiction problems will come from the fact that he completely remembers what had happened, because he does research, because he is altering his mind as he's doing research to find the ritual of Chud, and possibly because, as a child, he murdered someone. Okay? So maybe all of that will be addressed in the sequel. But for right now, that really took me out of it, and I felt that just Mike was a non-entity. I hope that in the sequel, Mike, the adult version of Mike, is given a lot more weight than the kid version of Mike was, because Mike in the movie doesn't have any notable interaction with any of the other Loser Club kids, not the way that Bev has with Ben or Bill, or Richie has with Eddie or Bill, or even Ben. So I want more out of this character, because I really like this character, and I thought the kid that played him was fine. It's just that, like Ben, he didn't have a lot to do. In fact, he had less to do in this movie than Ben did. So I'm hoping that we get more out of Mike in the sequel. And so that's one issue that I have. Another issue that I have, guys, and I have to talk about. So I mentioned it a little bit last week, I believe, but I couldn't really speak to it because, like I said, I was watching it at a drive-in theater, and the drive-in is not the best place to fully critique CGI and the special effects. But I guess this is going to be completely up to you. Maybe you don't care. Maybe you don't care about the CGI. Maybe it doesn't take you out. It completely takes me out. I am not a massive fan now of that opening scene. I like everything up until Pennywise's mouth opens to bite Georgie's arm off. And then everything from the rest of that scene I just don't like, because it just doesn't work from a visual perspective. It seems like a lesser movie. And the CGI for the rest of the movie, when it's used, whether it be the painting lady, whether it be Puppet Georgie in Bill's basement, whether it be the kids that eat Patrick or whatever they do to Patrick. And speaking of Patrick, I mean, come on, you get Patrick Hockstetter, who might be one of the most recipients of the most gruesome deaths in Stephen King history. I was thinking about this, and having flying insect leeches completely eat you alive would be a great nod to Stand By Me. Because a friend of mine, referred to this as Stand By Me on steroids, and everyone that knows that that's exactly the case. But I think that this would be a great kind of wink if they went with that with Patrick Hockstetter's death. But that's whatever. I mean, we get Patrick Hockstetter and he dies, and it's kind of nothing. It's kind of nothing. I still believe that Owen Teague should have played Henry. He just has more acting chops, and he has more menace, and he's kind of more unhinged than I believe that Henry is. I do like the way that the actor who played Henry played him in that dazed state when he went after the balloon in the mailbox and then went to his dad. I like that look on his face. I thought he did a really good job. But going back to the CGI, to me, it did not work. It just really didn't. When CGI is used in a horror movie for the effect of a scare, to me, it's just never scary. Maybe that's just me. Maybe that will always be completely subjective from person to person. Maybe others find it scary. Certainly, in the audience, people were jumping out of their seats and people were screaming, and yeah, that's great. That's great. But to me, it just doesn't work as a scare. Now, here's, I guess, the biggest issue that I have from a structural standpoint, and that is the climax of the movie onwards. So the end of the second act and all of the third act. It's still good, and it bothers me to even mention it because it's still good. But it really illustrates why Stephen King's book is a masterpiece and why this is a good movie. Neibolt Street. I don't like that it is I understand why it becomes the epicenter here. It's clean. It's a clean decision, right? This is where it lives. This is where it goes down in the sewers. Let's go to Neibolt Street. It is a location point that makes sense, right? Where in the book, Neibolt Street is a decision that the kids make to go to fight the monster. They do so, but realize that in order to really get to the monster, they have to get to the sewers, which means that they have to continue to think about this, continue to do more detective work, continue to use their brains, and then head into the sewers. So in the book, we see a literal escalation of the unreality of the world that they live in. So the layers get peeled back of reality as they literally descend deeper into magic. They go deeper and deeper into basically a fairy tale until they get to a fairy tale door that takes them to the threshold of another universe entirely. Here we get them going to Neibolt Street and then them going back to Neibolt Street. I believe that the decision to limit the entrance to the clown's lair, I believe that it created redundancy. So by the second time they went to the Neibolt Street house, I felt that the story became a little bit more listless than it should be in that moment. Rather than ramping up, it had the sense of retread, been there, done that. What saves it is the interactions between the characters, but having to go back to the same physical location, to me, took the wind out of the sails. Now, in the book, Neibolt Street, let's deconstruct this. This was the kids using their deductive skills because between Eddie's leper and between Richie and Bill almost getting eviscerated by the werewolf at Neibolt Street, they realized that that house was a location of this creature, and they thought that this is where it was, where it resided, and this is where they make the decision to go kill it. So it is them truly gathering their strength and their resources, their resiliency, and working together as a group, really for the first time, to go hunt this creature. It is also the scene where they are truly in danger as a group for the first time. There is true menace in that scene. At any time, they could die, and they are able to beat it back. They don't kill it. It escapes into the drain, and that's when they realize that it lives really in the sewers, and they have to go hunt it down. So that leads them to their next quest to get into the sewers. So the house on Neibolt Street leads to the next part of the book. Whereas here, going to Neibolt Street leads them only going back to Neibolt Street, which is kind of to me, like I said, we've been there, we've seen it, we've done that, and also Henry has less to do. Henry shows up, Henry is dispatched, and that's it. In the book, Henry and Victor and Belch are following them through the sewers. There is the sense that the Losers Club are at risk of getting lost in the sewers. So there's the danger of an extra-dimensional child-eating entity in the sewers that they're actively hunting. There is the risk of them very realistically getting lost and dying alone in the dark from dehydration and cold. And then there is the risk of being killed by a sociopathic bully who is coming up behind them, so who also presents this wild card factor. So there is a lot of tension in the book that I feel is not quite here, because Henry shows up, I believe, to give Mike something to do, and then is dispatched. I will say this about Henry's death, if it is a death at all. His death as he falls through the well reveals a deeper section of the lair than where the kids were residing at the cistern. So that actually could open up the fact that Henry might not be dead at all. At the very least, it does reveal that when the clown disappears down the well at the very, very end, it shows that the Derry goes down much further than just the house on Neibolt Street. So that is, to me, kind of an issue that presented itself the second time around, because, like I said, by this point, when I was watching it the first time, I was so enamored with the moon rising behind the screen. I was paying more attention to the moon and not the ending of the movie, which last week I discussed my issues with the fact that it is such a physical ending. They're just beating the monster with weaponry, which I still have issues with, because I don't believe that it should just be about fear and not being afraid. That's one component, I believe, of what makes the book work so much. That is one theme that King is describing, but the one theme that I believe that Muscietti did not really explore, which to me personally is the most important, and that is the magic of childhood and how that magic is corrupted within adulthood, and how you can use the literal magic of childhood to combat the trappings of adulthood, and that really to me was not on display. And maybe it's because, and this is sad, but 2017 kids don't play the way that they did when I was growing up, and maybe it's because the kids were aged up. They were middle school kids. Here they're high school kids. They're freshmen, or maybe it's an 8 through 12 school. I don't know. But they don't seem to be really playing. But the thing is, the kids in Stranger Things from the Duffer Brothers, I can picture those kids playing. I can picture them playing in a stream and building building a dam just to see what they can do, and going and playing like Safari, and like I can see those kids. doing that in Stranger Things. I don't see our kids here doing that. Which again, I love the kids in this movie. Seeing it again, like there was one scene that I didn't notice the first time around when in the background Richie is just playing, like there's the parade, the 4th of July parade, and Richie's just playing with his other kid's tuba. It's just such a great background gag, and I just love Muscietti nailed Richie again. I've listened to some reviews where they're kind of dismissive of Richie, saying that he's just the loudmouth, but that's not it. That's not it. When they're in the Barrens and Bill wants to go in the sewer, Richie is right behind him. When Bill goes into the house on Neibolt Street, Richie's afraid, but it's Richie on the stairs right beside him. Richie is his right-hand man. Richie is a leader of the group. The group, splinters, not necessarily because Eddie is taken away, but because Bill and Richie have their fight. So I really am happy that Muscietti got that Richie character right. He isn't just a jokester. He is very much the heart and soul of the group. So here's a thought about the sequel. I think that the very smart decision to separate this the story into two parts, the first part being the kids and the second part being the adults, I believe it was a very smart and very clean decision. However, in doing so, I think that it also does back them into a corner for the sequel, because it also reveals the brilliance of King's storytelling abilities and how he wove this narrative between these two timelines in and out of each other. So in the book, we get the establishing scene of Georgie, of course, but then we start to get the present day with the adults, and as we meet the adults, he starts to introduce the mysteries of Derry, and he starts to raise the question of what happened in the past, and in the flashbacks he starts answering what happened that our adult characters are asking. And because our adult characters are in the dark, we are in the dark with our main characters, so these reveals which happened in the past are meaningful. The problem is that we have now experienced everything in the past. Therefore, if our adult characters have memory loss, it's going to feel like a waste of time because we know the answers. So while I understand the decision to break it into two clean parts, kids and adults, I see now that there might be some issues with the adult story. And maybe it really won't matter in the end. And I think actually there is some space to tell some story that we might not have seen. We did see Pennywise hint at the cosmic nature of itself, and with the fall of Henry Bowers, it would be cool if there was a secret memory that they all forgot about, in which they actually went after the clown even deeper, and they saw its true self, and there was a battle that we did not see that they actually had, and it's that mystery that is strung throughout the second movie. That would be cool if there was like the secret history of the Losers Club that we did not see that was running parallel here. It's almost like this is the edited version of the story of the Losers Clubs as kids. I think would probably be the solution to that, and I hope that that's the route that Muscietti takes, because if this is it, I mean, if this is the story that they can't remember and we remember it because we just saw it twice, 3 times, then it's going to be a lot of let's get to the point once we start watching the sequel. And I don't know. I just feel like I've been thinking about the sequel a lot now since I've seen the movie, and I think that it needs to be a companion piece, and be its own thing, and less the same thing again, if that makes any sense. I think that because this movie, now let's talk about the scares a little bit. I mean, because people, and I'll weigh in on this, and maybe it's subjective. I mean, two genres more than any other genre are subjective, and that's comedy and horror. If you think something's funny, you think something's funny. If you think something's scary, you think something's scary. And it has less to do with cerebral understanding and analysis, and it just has to do with primal reactions. But to me, it was always spooky in that Tim Burton kind of way, with the exception of, like Georgie dying. But even then, I didn't think it was scary. I mean, they went there with it. It was certainly graphic, but to me, that wasn't scary. It wasn't even that unsettling. It's disturbing in concept, but I think the actualization of it, because it never felt that his arm really was gone, it took me out of it. So I felt it was spooky more than it was scary, and there was a celebratory nature in the scares that were occurring. When the balloon pops and Pennywise is right there, you kind of jump and you giggle, and that's what happened in the audience. That's what happened. People screamed and then they laughed, and to me there was a difference there that is not necessarily scary. That is a haunted house effect of celebrating a quick fright, a quick scary, a quick scare. It's a celebration of being spooky. It isn't designed to really get under your skin. So an example of a Stephen King movie that is supposed to get under your skin, that does not celebrate being afraid, it simply goes for the jugular and it invades you and it makes you feel uncomfortable. That is The Shining. Stanley Kubrick's The Shining does not say, hey, it's fun to be scared. It just scares the shit out of you, and it sticks with you, and it makes you feel like you're going insane, and it makes you feel like you are claustrophobic. And there are no jump scares just to make you jump and then laugh at the fact that you just jumped at something on the screen. It is haunting. It is claustrophobic. It is insanity. It is it gets to you. Or maybe it's just me. Maybe it gets to me, and I shouldn't be speaking for how it affects you. But that is the difference here, I believe, when some people are talking about whether or not it's scary. If you find The Shining scary, to be truly scary, then I don't think that you can really call this movie scary on the same level. But that's not necessarily what Muscietti was going for. He wasn't trying to make something along the lines of this dread-filled tale, the way that The Shining is full of dread. I mean, that wasn't the point. He had a different intent, and his intent was to capture this childhood sense of fear. Now, he caught the childhood reality of adults disappointing us at every turn very, very well with the interactions with the adults and the kids. And that, I would say, is the true horror of this chapter. That is the true sticking point and the thing that really, really sticks with you. So, I mean, just the look of disappointment and fear and hurt and pain on Bev's face with her father, and the look of embarrassment on the face of Eddie with his mother, and the look of pain and quiet withdrawal from Bill when he looks at his father. So this is the true horror of it. Everything else is just kind of spooky fun, and it's the celebratory nature of the things that go bump in the night that we as children, when we were children, loved about Halloween and monster movies, and that celebration is there in this child's story. Now, this is why I think the sequel needs to be different, because the scares in this movie reflect the things that we find scary as children. And the things that we find scary as children, we might not necessarily find scary as adults. I believe that because this movie reflected those childhood scares, I believe that the sequel needs to reflect adult fears. I would love to see it be more existential in its terror. And I just don't mean from a cosmic. Yes, I know it's going to go cosmic. So I believe questions of mortality and a and musings on the finite nature of our lifespans, and the fact that we will all die, and the possibility of no afterlife. I mean, I believe that these are things that need to be explored. The fact that we don't realize all of our dreams, that we live unfulfilled lives. Hey, welcome to the Stephen King cast, where I talk about all the happy stuff. But I mean, I think that's the kind of fear and the terror and the content that should be addressed in the sequel. I always talk about comic books when I talk about anything, really. So, I mean, Grant Morrison, famed comic book writer, wrote a series of comic books, all threaded in and out of each other, called Seven Soldiers, back in the earlier 2000s. And one of them, they were all 4-issue miniseries, and they were bookended by 2 one-shots. One kicked it off, and then the last one brought all of the different 7 books. So there's 28. There was 28 issues, actually 30 issues, but 28 issues bookended by one shots. And there was one 4-issue miniseries called The Guardian, or the Manhattan Guardian. I can't remember. Yeah, it's the Manhattan Guardian. Anyway, so the Manhattan Guardian, to make a long story short, there is one issue that is all about these kids, these newsies, basically, and it shows what happens to these adventurers, these kid adventurers, as they grow up, and it's tragic what happens to them, and Grant Morrison is able to just get to the heart of the loss of possibility, and how as a child you think that your future is open and endless, and as you head into adulthood you realize that it is not some endless field, it's a closed-in backyard, and there's only so much room that you're actually going to be able to explore. And so again, welcome to the Stephen King cast. But I mean, I think that is the type of thing that's clearly what Stephen King was able to get across so well. Just the musings on adulthood, and the failings of infinite possibility, and being able to accept who you are, and being able to accept the life that you live. And these are true aspects to life that I feel need to be explored in the sequel. So that is just that's what I would like to see. That's what I would like to see in the sequel. Because, look, if we just get retreads of our monsters here, if we just get Little Georgie again, or we get the painting monster again, or I mean, of course we're going to get the clown, but if we get the leper, like if we just get the recreations of the monsters that we saw the first time, I don't care. We've seen our characters face off against these interpretations, these fears. Enough. We need to see what speaks to these characters as adults to scare them. So that to me is what I would be looking for. I'm actually looking for a completely different movie than what this movie was. Not that there's anything wrong with this movie. This deserves all of the praise that it's getting. I just think that a movie about adults should reflect adult fears. So I've talked about the whether it's spooky, whether it's scary. One thing that I did not talk about, I thought that definitely was spooky. There was a lot of jump scares. However, when Muscietti decides to go subtle, that really works, and it sticks with me. So there's 2 things that he does in this movie very, very well that I did not notice the first time around. I didn't even notice. It's not that I noticed the second time around. It was pointed out on the internet to me, and I'm very enamored with his abilities to do this. So for those of you who did not notice this, when Ben is first in the library and he is given the book on Derry's history, don't watch Ben during that scene. Just look behind Ben. I just got goosebumps. You see what you think is the librarian at first, just standing behind him, crouched down in anticipation, just reveling in what he's reading. She's out of focus. It is very unsettling once you realize that it's there. It's that same kind of just kind of feeling that you get kind of like when you watch Three Men and a Baby, when Ted Danson walks across the screen and you see the shotgun, and he walks back across the screen and you see the boy. Once you know it's there, it is very, very unsettling. And so that scene is one of them. Another one is the fact that it keeps cutting to the adults in Derry, and it doesn't really focus on it too much, but they're watching this children's television show, and it is just, you can tell that it's Pennywise just constantly brainwashing them, and the more you think about it, the more unsettling it is to think that he can be that overt, and the parents can be that, or the adults can be that or gullible or open to suggestion. And the fact that we kind of don't pay attention to what's on the screen, and we can be used through what's on the screen. Clearly, even though this was set in the 1980s, very much speaks to our current day, with the fact that we are on our cell phones and we are in front of television screens and computer screens all the time. The idea that we can be so easily brainwashed by what is on a screen is a very, very current fear. So those two things shows me that he can definitely get to those more adult, subtle, deeper scares than just the jump scares. But I would say that based on the effectiveness and popularity and critical success and financial success of this movie, I'd imagine that we're going to get very much the same types of scares. That would be my bet. So if he, I think it would be a bold move to move away from this and to move towards a deeper dread. And like I said, those more existential fears and the more social commentary. I believe that would be a sign of some very confident studio involvement and some very confident filmmaking, director filmmaking. And Muschietti's got the chops. He has the chops. He has what it takes. I would just like to see, that come to fruition. So I guess to wrap up, and I've been talking about it for an hour now, guys. That's great. Just to wrap up, I really enjoy this movie. I don't know where we would land if I was to do another top 10 of Stephen King adaptations. This one I'm very curious to see, how time honors it. If it does get bumped up to that number one spot, if it is in the top 5 or the top 3. Certainly it was fun to just watch the kids again and to watch Skarsgård again and just revel in how much fun he's having in this role, and noticing things that I don't think that I noticed the first time around, like how he drooled, and he's just great. He's great in this role all time. He's an all-timer now. I mean, in the limited screen time that he has, he established himself as a all-time on-screen villain, and I haven't seen much of it yet, but just wait, guys. Just wait. I guarantee you that you're going to start to see a slew of Bill Skarsgård Pennywise impressions, because he gives a very definitive performance, and he's doing some very memorable things with his voice that I think that we're going to start to see aped and parodied a lot. Saturday Night Live comes back very soon. Does it come back tonight? I wouldn't be surprised if we have an It parody with a Skarsgård impersonation. I think that we're going to start to see that very, very soon, which is always the sign of something just latching on to pop culture consciousness that will endure throughout the decades. So I loved it. I loved it the first time. I loved it the second time. I do have issues structurally with the third act this time that really presented itself. But it is what it is. It doesn't take away from the heart of the movie, which is definitely the kids and the relationships and Muscietti's ability to craft a scene, and any issues that I might have with the fact that it doesn't necessarily quote unquote scare me, that it has nothing to do with the talent behind it, because that all has to do with intent. This movie is exactly what Andy Muschietti intended it to be, and it's a perfect realization of the director's intent. So I mean, I have nothing but praise for this movie, nothing but praise for the actors and the cinematography. I guess the biggest issue that I would have is the reliance on the CGI, but it is 2017. That is the world that we live in. Okay, guys, so with all of that said, I am going to now go through some listener emails. So keep the emails coming, guys. I can't do it without you. So if you have any thoughts on it, or my thoughts on it, write in at stephenkingcast@yahoo.com. So up first we have Chris, who writes, "Hello, I'm a big fan of your show and I'm looking forward to your assessment of it. I'm especially eager to hear your thoughts on the town they used for Derry, Port Hope, Ontario. Port Hope happens to be my hometown. I was beside myself when they were filming here last summer. All the scenes downtown Derry, outside the library, in the theater lobby, in the pharmacy, behind Bev's place, and the town park center with Paul Bunyan. This includes the aerial shots and the scenes of the losers riding their bikes around town. The house on Neibolt Street was in Oshawa, Ontario. I grew up a Stephen King fan, but reading it was always too daunting. The Stand was my it. That is until it started filming right around the corner. Connecting my childhood memories growing up in Port Hope to the streets of the losers traveled in Derry while recently reading the novel was an incredibly personal experience that was truly unique and moving." I'm going to interject. I can only imagine. That is incredible. So, Chris, congratulations. I mean, I think that you, like you said, I think that you really do have a unique take on it. And Chris continues here, if for whatever reason you need an insider in Port Hope, considering chapter 2 is all but scheduled to shoot, let me know. Chris in Port Hope. Chris, please keep me updated as they start filming. So just write in at stephenkingcast@yahoo.com to let me know if you get any scoops or any good pics, and I'll definitely share it. I'll share any pictures on Instagram and Twitter, and I will share anything that you need to share with the world. Stephen King Cast will be your voice. So thank you. And Dave writes, "It is really too big for even 2 movies and should be developed to a series to do the source material justice. The pilot episode could focus on Georgie and the paper boat, as well as introducing the town and the Losers Club. Following installments could take the time to build the characters and flesh out their backstories, all the while teasing Pennywise and the history of Derry a la Lost." I'm going to interject. As I record this, it is September 23rd, 2017. 13 years ago, guys, 13 years ago on this date, Lost premiered and changed television. So I know people talk about that ending. The ending became a joke, I think, for all of the wrong reasons. I do believe that history is going to be a lot kinder to Lost. I think that within the next 10 years, there is going to be, everything is cyclical. I think that the cycle is going to come back around to Lost. People are going to revisit it. And people will look back on it a lot more fondly, especially as the legend of the leftovers grow and the estimation of Damon Lindelof continues to grow. But 13 years ago on this date, Lost premiered and changed how we tell stories on television. And it definitely changed my life. As a human being, this show changed my life. So I definitely needed to throw that out there. So, Dave continues, "That being said, I think the film is very good. It is not perfect by any stretch, but definitely not a disappointment like The Dark Tower. I fully agree. The screenwriters and director did a nice job presenting the major themes and giving the story a modern flavor inside the limitations of a 2-hour and 15-minute runtime. Skarsgård's interpretation of Pennywise and the focus of Beverly Marsh were the primary highlights of my first viewing. I'm anxious to see it again for a more complete assessment." So, Dave, it looks like you and I were very much on the same page. And, yeah, in this day and age, it's hard to argue that things won't be better in a television series. It really won't. I think that movies are now kind of becoming poems in a way. You have to get to the heart of something with a very limited amount of time, much the way that poems kind of need to get to the truth and the heart of a subject much quicker than prose. So it's forcing filmmakers to have to be very stylistic and abstract and symbolic in their approach in ways that I find very, very poignant and potent. Will writes, Dear Constant Reader, I've been looking forward to the new It adaptation since the first teaser dropped earlier this year, and after catching a screener yesterday, September 9th, I was not disappointed. Is it a perfect one-to-one adaptation of the 1957-1958 portions of the novel? Of course not. The mere fact that they moved the time period forward by 30 years ruled that out. I do, however, think that they did justice to the overall spirit of the novel. It's hard to resist drawing comparisons between this and a certain other King adaptation that was released recently, but where The Dark Tower was a rushed, muddled mess, I felt that it streamlined the admittedly dense source material as necessary while doing it justice. We have to remember, after all, that even adjusting for the shift in time period, a straight adaptation of that half of the novel would probably be flirting with at least 4 hours worth of running time. If The Dark Tower represents the drunken, half-hearted skimming of a Wikipedia summary, it demonstrates the work of creators who are familiar with the novel and tried to accurately portray it while still adhering to the limitations of time, budget, etc. Were there things that I, as a fan of the novel, disliked about it? Of course! The abduction of Beverly seemed trite to me, but her active role in the subsequent battle did help to make up for that in my mind. I'm going to interject, great point, and I love that it all comes down to the fact that Pennywise fails and he gets beaten because of the miscalculation of being able to instill fear in Bev. That the horror that she is subjected to and the real fear that her father could at any point actually rape her, that is a legit fear in her mind. Anything else is not scary. That to me is such a great decision, and the look of fearlessness on her face whenever she's around the clown is truly something that sticks with me. And when she defeats him in the end. I mean, she's the one that just jams the thing down its throat, and it's so fulfilling in that moment. You know, that it takes the face of her father, and it is the stupidest thing that it could have done. Because in that moment, she just lashes out in rage, not fear, and is able to defeat him. You know, so yeah, Bill gives the killing blow, but really it's Bev. It's Bev in that moment that does it. So, anyway, it did help to make that up in my mind. The literal floating made me roll my eyes a little. Yep, and the throwaway line about the kids coming back down after Pennywise defeat made me worry for a moment that they'd go the route of having the kids just be catatonic, coming back to life like Beverly after its influence wears off. I was glad, how weird to phrase it like that they were all well and truly dead. To have these dozens of victims all turn out to be okay would severely lessen the monster's villainy in my eyes, I agree. I would have liked to have seen Mr. Keene be the one, as in the novel, spill the beans to Eddie about his meds being fake. I also would have liked to have seen Pennywise take additional forms, the werewolf, the mummy, the Rodan thing, etc., but those are probably more quibbles of a book fan more than anything else. It makes me wonder, though, if the kids from the 1950s were scared of the teenage werewolf and the mummy, what would scare the losers if we adjust for 30 more years of pop cultural baddies? Would it be fair to expect the filmmakers to buy the rights to show it taking the form of the alien Michael Myers Carpenter's version of The Thing, etc.? So I'm going to interject. I think I talked about this last week, but I understand the rationale to avoid giving us pop culture recreations of the things that scare us from a pop cultural standpoint. However, part of the brilliance of Stephen King's novel is that it is a rumination and a celebration and a thesis of horror. It is the fictional counterpart to his non-fiction essay, Danse Macabre. And so much of it is rooted in the truth of his childhood and the things that drew him to terror and drew him to the things that are quote unquote scary, and the joy that we have in embracing the scary things. And in his case, it was I was a teenage werewolf. It was the 1950s movies of the things that came from above, and outer space and the universal monsters. And those horror creatures and the sci-fi movies of the time, those were an integral part of Stephen King growing up, and they were fundamental aspects of his storytelling sensibilities, and it's wrapped up entirely in what it was in the book. So to me, I do believe that we did have a 1980s counterpart to the iconic monsters of the 50s and prior to the 50s. And I do believe that they were like Will writes, like Will says, Alien and The Thing. But I honestly do believe that we did live in a time where in the 1980s we had Freddy and we had Jason, we had Leatherface, we had Michael, we had Chucky, and we did have these characters, and they were on a first name basis. We were on a first name basis with them, and I know that New Line Cinema owns the rights to at least two of them, and at least to have one character be a pop culture aficionado. If Richie was afraid of them, to me that would have made sense. And if that character goes into the world of movies as an adult, it would make sense to me. And it would be a natural trajectory for him to follow those fears into adulthood, and be a movie star or be a comedian or whatever. But if that character was afraid not of clowns, which already we get a clown. We don't need him to be afraid of clowns, to me. What if he was afraid of... What if he was someone that went to the movies all the time? Like, we saw the movies in the back. We saw Freddy Krueger. We saw Nightmare on Elm Street. What if we saw Richie loving to go to the movies, but being afraid of going to the movies at the same time because of the things that he loved? That was me. That was me as a kid. I loved Freddy Krueger, but I also had problems sleeping at night because of Freddy Krueger. And that... and I would have loved to have seen that represented in this movie, and I think that the more I think about it, the more it is a missed opportunity to be a statement of pop culture and a reflection of pop culture and a reflection of the things that made us that just sort of represented a period of a time period, and a reflection of fear and horror. Then I think that we should have had Robert Englund make a cameo as Freddy Krueger in this movie, as a clown version of Freddy Krueger, and then have him then have that character morph into Michael Myers and Jason. I think that we are missing out by having that. I think that the movie kind of needed that, because that did speak to childhood fears of the 1980s. That was a big part of the 1980s. It was a big part, and it was represented in this movie in the background, but I think that it should have come into the foreground. I have to say that I was surprised at the lack of the "You'll Float Too" during the Georgie Pennywise encounter at the beginning of the film, though the line does get its use as the film progresses. Incidentally, it was a bit surreal to hear Pennywise talk about popcorn being his favorite, while I was sitting in a screening room filled with people, myself included, who were eating the stuff. Intentional part on the screenwriters, do you think? Absolutely. Which is, there are reasons why this movie succeeds, and it's decisions like that why this movie succeeds. Would it have been nice to see the smokehouse vision? Yes. Would it have been nice to see the slingshot and the silver slugs? Yes. Would it have been nice to have seen the ritual of Chud? Yes. Would it have been nice to have seen the turtle? Yes. As a fan of the novel, it would have been wonderful to see all of those things, but I also have to ask, does the film work on its own? For me, yes. Absolutely. With regard to the last two elements I mentioned, we have to remember that both of the novel's story arcs end with the ritual and the battle inside the mind with it. Had they included the ritual, the spiral, and the turtle here, it would have seemed repetitive, especially to the non-book reader moviegoers, if the second chapter ends the same way. Completely agree. Now, my gut tells me that we will see neither the ritual nor the turtle in the next installment, though I think that the spider is still a possibility, but still worth keeping that in mind, I think. I'm going to interject. We are going to see the ritual of the Chud, which is fantastic. The couple of shout-outs to the turtle do show the filmmakers were aware of it and wished to include it in some way, and I did appreciate it. If we're lucky, those Easter eggs may end up serving as foreshadowing when the sequel floats around. I thought that the performances were strong all around. I don't always like the child actor performances, but I love the losers. Finn Wolfhard is great, of course, and I think that Sophia Lillis has great things ahead of her. Bill Skarsgård brought a definite creepiness to his portrayal, less affably evil monster clown and more eldritch abomination trying its damnedest to pretend to be human. I know it's a 1990 miniseries, mostly by reputation. I've seen a few scenes, but I've yet to sit down and watch the whole thing. I do like what I've seen of Curry's portrayal, though, and I think that Skarsgård more than fills his shoes. I also like that music. Enough of a fixture of King's novels to be considered its own Kingism, had an appreciable presence here as well. It's obvious that King loves his rock and roll, as do I, and it was good to see the filmmakers recognize that, adjusting to the specific songs as needed in the 1980s. I'm going to interject. I didn't talk about the apocalyptic rock fight, a highlight of this movie. That is so fun. And watching the crowd went nuts during that scene when Richie screams out "Rock War." It is awesome when the use of the slow-mo, just the victory of the kids, all of it, the music, it is great. In the book, it's less fun. I mean, it's called the apocalyptic rock fight. I mean, there is a sense of like this is like nukes being launched at each other and there is a terror there, but here is just like fun. It was great. It was a great aspect of the movie. All in all, I'd call this a solid 4 out of 5 for me. My issues with the film can't be dismissed, but they weren't such that I couldn't enjoy the movie. If The Dark Tower is an example of how to do an adaptation poorly, it is an example of how to do one well. To me, it comes down to this. Absent of any knowledge of the source material, The Dark Tower explodes on impact, but it makes me want to return to the novel, even though it's only been 4.5 months since I read it. I await it, Chapter 2, as eagerly as I await hearing your thoughts and your listeners. All the best, Will. Will, that is a really well thought out examination of this movie. A lot of your viewpoints mirror my own, and some issues that I have, I kind of am walking back now because you're right. I mean, it stands on its own. If I didn't know what the book was and I just watched it, I probably would I probably wouldn't have issues. I probably would just go along for the ride. Which at the end of the day, that's just what Muscietti has to do, and he did it well. So thank you for writing that. It makes me. I kind of have issues with me having issues with the movie because the movie is so good, and an email like that helps temper those issues that I have. Then Quinn writes, Dear Mr. Stephen King Cast, it's been a long time since I've written in, but I promise I've still been listening to all the episodes. Well, thank you. Anyways, the It movie. I was first in line at the theater. I wore my It shirt. And the day before the movie, my dad bought a red balloon and put it in my room without me knowing. Your dad should win an award. He sounds like a good guy. Needless to say, I walked into that theater sporting wood. Beep, beep, Quinn. But when I left, I was borderline depressed. Gonna interject. I really loved that beep, beep, Richie moment. I wasn't... And I gotta say that scene with the clown, that little clown cathedral room, the crowd was going nuts. The crowd was going insane with all of the clowns. And, Finn Wolfhard rocks that scene. He's great. And the moment where Skarsgård jumps out and it zooms in on him and there is like the music swells to this moment of silence and there's a pause and he says, beep, beep, Richie. That is it's one of those celebratory fanfic fanboy moments. You know what I mean? That is such a shout out. But the lack of beep, beep, Richie throughout the movie, the fact that they never said that there was no no example of their own language or no characteristics of their friendship like that, it's going to make the sequel less impactful because they won't be able to repeat that and invoke their childhood. I feel. I think that was a missed opportunity by having the characters just say beep, beep, Richie. Unless, hey, actually, you know what? Whoever they get as adult Richie, and I hope that's Bill Hader, I really hope he continues to go for high fives. I hope he makes bad jokes and goes for high fives. That is a good way of actually getting in on that connection, that connective tissue from one movie to the next. Okay, and up next, let's see. Quinn continues, and he says, "When I saw it ruthlessly turn into a crazy many-teeth monster and saw through Georgie's arm like it was nothing, I legitimately felt bad for Georgie as he jumped backwards and tried to crawl away crying. It was incredibly effective and one of the greatest scenes I've ever watched in any movie. Also, I love the character work, especially Beverly. When she cuts off her hair after feeling over-sexualized by men, I really felt for her, and I like the fact that right after her dad makes her feel uncomfortable by buying tampons, the blood in the bathroom scene happens. Totally true. This symbolizes her fear of womanhood very well. I don't know if you mentioned it in your It book review, that was a long time ago, but I think this is the first time I realized why Beverly saw the blood instead of a male character. Absolutely right. Aside from a few good scary scenes, the brutal Henry Bowers carving an H on Ben scene, and the great chemistry between characters, especially Richie and Eddie, the movie fell apart for me. Number 1. It felt even less of a threat in this movie than in the miniseries. I do agree with that. He had plenty of chances to kill them, but just because they were main characters, he would literally disappear at the last second, or a door would open, or some such bullshit. I'm going to interject. This can be explained in the sequel. I hope that the adult characters actually ask that question. And I hope that they ask themselves, like, why did they survive? And why did Betty Ripson die? Why did Patrick Hockstetter die? Why did Georgie Denbrough die? Why did those characters, why were they able to get pulled away? And why did we live? I really hope that they have that conversation. Because if they start to have that conversation and they start to get to the heart of it, that there is a magic that was generated by the 7 of them, that maybe it knew that on some level it couldn't quite penetrate them, it couldn't quite get through to them, that there was another cosmic buffer standing in between the kids' way and the clown's way. Again, much like what I said about Mike before, a sequel could go a long way in explaining that and just blowing away any criticisms of that if they introduce the turtle, if they introduce the magic, if they introduce the concept of ka-tet, and that's what the strength, that's where their strength is derived from, that together as a group they can counteract the evil effects of this clown. So I'm hoping that the sequel is able to rectify these concerns, and I do share those concerns. Number 2, Quinn continues, characters made stupid decisions. They went into the house on Neibolt Street unarmed and then decided to fucking split up when they heard scary noises and walk right into danger, again unarmed. I completely agree. Number 3, the most important theme of the novel was not present. The book is about how the only reason they can hurt it is because they believe they can. They use the silver slug in the slingshot because they believe that silver hurts monsters. They use the placebo medicine in the inhaler because Eddie believes it helps him. Bill thrusts his fists against the post and still insists he sees the ghosts, stuttering phrase because he has to overcome a weakness with it, etc. The book was all about power and where it comes from, which is within us. The only thing that made sense was Mike learning when it takes to kill the sheep with the gun, but they hardly touched upon that at all. Mostly, they hurt this supposedly immortal being by stabbing fence posts in it and hitting it with a baseball bat. They killed it with regular weapons instead of meaningful items, turning it into any other Hollywood monster and not just the unique it that I know. It's like the filmmakers missed the thrust of the novel, and I do echo much of that sentiment. I do believe that this novel does not have the "this is battery acid, you slime" moment. It doesn't have the slingshot silver slugs moment. And I do believe that it suffers from a lack of... It goes back, like I said, the novel is about the magic of childhood and the power of imagination, and the fact that the clown is imagination corrupted, and it is the child's purity and the magic of the childhood's purity that is able to combat that evil. And we don't have that here. So it's going to make it, and that is the challenge of being an adult, being able to tap into that. So, I mean, you can read into so much about this. I mean, that the magic with Stephen King, it never left him, which is why he is the prolific author that he is. He's able to create these magical worlds and these magical stories that are blowing up at the box office and will continue on long after he's dead. That is magic, ladies and gentlemen. That is like to take something that does not exist, that exists only as an intangible concept in your mind, and to be able to share that as something literal, something concrete, and spread it to others so that it will exist after you die. That is magic. Okay, magic exists, and Stephen King is a wonderful magician, and the movie doesn't really touch upon that, which is a missed opportunity. Number 4, it didn't shapeshift into anything cool. It was only the clown and then a variety of deformed humanoid figures, zombies, lepers, a burnt kid, admittedly creepy girl, and that was about it. Number 5, the pacing needed work. Sometimes they crammed in scare after scare almost randomly instead of pacing them out more evenly. Number 6, the movie started to feel like an adaptation of a Goosebumps book instead of a Stephen King one. Again, this goes back to my first point about them never being in any real danger. Beverly is kidnapped, but for some reason not killed. Or maybe she is killed but brought back with a kiss? Okay. And when it is biting Stan's face but then runs away because they shine a flashlight at it? They should have grown some balls and just killed one of the kids. That would have been crazy and unexpected change that I would have welcomed, not this false sense of being in danger. Number 7, that ridiculous dancing scene that I am sure will become a meme. Yeah, I didn't touch upon that. I don't like it. I don't like that scene. Maybe others do. I don't like it. Number 8, when it died or went into early hibernation, I guess, it awkwardly says fear. Why? What purpose did that serve? And although in the book offers to make them rich and successful if they let it live, it never came off as a sniveling little bee, actually breaking down and talking to them as if it were human too, as it did in this movie. I kind of think that no, it does. It's not pleading. It does give them that ultimatum there, but it's not pleading. And I do love that about Stephen King, how his villains always just wind up just being cowards in the end. And that's what I like about Henry as a villain in the book. Henry is always kind of bumbling. You know, he is an intimidating figure, but gets kicked in the nuts and kind of beaten by Ben after, he's carving, the H into Ben's stomach. And that is kind of recreated here when the kid playing him, gets the wind kicked out of him and he goes rolling down the hill, and he's always talking like a Christian Bale Batman voice, and it's never kind of authentic. So I kind of struggled. I do have issues with the Henry character here. Like, to me, he never has the menace of Henry through the kid's perspective, because we get the 1-2 punch of Henry in the book of through the kid's perspective where he is awful, but we also get him more from an objective standpoint where he's kind of buffoonish. Here, to me, he's just less than what he could be. And I feel like either if they went with Owen Teague and had him be just a cartoonish menace, I think that it would have worked. Or if we got him as the buffoonish interpretation, I think that it would have worked. And we kind of got in the middle, and to me, it didn't work as much. Anyway, it was more disappointing than The Dark Tower because I expected The Dark Tower to suck, which it did, but I had high hopes for it, and it hugely disappointed me. It's hard to believe that the Rotten Tomatoes score is an 88. I would have given it a 40, and then after reconsidering the strong first few scenes, would have sympathetically bumped it up to a 50. I hope the sequel learns from its mistakes, but considering that it has such a high score and is basically being deemed perfect, I know they'll follow the exact same formula. Sigh. Quinn. So Quinn, I mean, you definitely did not like it. I liked it a lot more than you did, although you and I share a lot of the same issues. I just don't think that the issues weighed as much with me as they did for you. And then we have a fellow Stephen King podcast host of Tower Junkies. So guys, when you are done listening here, head on over and support another member of our larger quartet, the Tower Junkies. And Matt from the Tower Junkies writes, "Hey, Constant Reader, I've been a long-time listener and have made it a routine to listen to your podcast every Stephen King book I finish. I saw it yesterday afternoon with a group of people, and we all really enjoyed it. I love the depiction of Derry and found myself really wanting to live in that world. As morbid as that may sound, I love the filmmakers. I think they really captured the heart of the town of Derry and the Losers Club themselves. Bev was incredibly charming, and the chemistry between her and the Losers Club was really sweet. The friendship in the quarry scene felt so genuine and really tapped into my nostalgia. I liked Bill Skarsgård's performance quite a bit and was shocked at how small the budget was, $35 million. I've seen some people online have issues with the CGI. guilty, but I felt like they really utilized the budget well. As much as, well, they're going to have a much bigger budget next time around. As much as I love the story and the presentation, as far as it as a horror movie is concerned, I didn't find it particularly scary. The set pieces were done well and were suspenseful. The Neibolt Street sequence was incredible, but I didn't experience much fear throughout the movie, and that's something that I mirror. It didn't detract from the experience for me, but I wonder if other people had the same thought. Can't wait to hear your review. So Matt, thank you for writing in, and thank you for sharing Stephen King thoughts into the multiverse a la podcasts. I think we podcasters need to stick together. Matt, let's see. So that was Matt. So guys, head on over to towerjunkiespod.com, a Stephen King Dark Tower podcast. And then we have Carl, who writes, "Hi again, constant reader." Hi again, Carl. "Let me just say that it's great to have you back, and your absence, short as it was surely felt. Thank you." Anyways, on to my thoughts. On the surface, I love this movie. I thought it was genuinely well made and a lot of fun. However, as an adaptation, I liken it more to Kubrick's The Shining. While standing fine on its own, I don't think that the book was given the ... respect it deserves. While it is leaps and bounds better than the miniseries, some things just came across as shallow. No barons, no thank you. And the use of CGI seemed to overutilize and ill-advised, the most egregious of this coming only a few short minutes into the film. Pennywise seemed a bit underutilized as well, but despite my complaints and bugaboos, I still have to say that the movie was an 8 out of 10 for me, based solely on the movie and not as an adaptation. And I suppose that's a good thing. If it was word for word like King's novel, wouldn't that bore us all? And that is the balance between making adaptations. How much do you treat the source material as sacred text, and how much do you make adaptations? I wonder if the issues that I have and the issues with some people here have, if time and the distance that we have, we'll be able to just embrace the movie as a movie more. I don't know. We'll find out. Long days and pleasant nights, from Carl. Thank you, Carl. And Sandy writes, "Good day, constant reader. So my name is Sandy, and I write from sunny Canberra, Australia. I hope I pronounced that right. My friend Emma and I have been listening to your podcast for almost a year now, and since the start of last year, have been working our way through all of Stephen King's movies. We can call our marathons Every King." I like that. So Sandy, thank you. I have a couple Australian listeners. And just a quick note, legitimately, there isn't a day that goes by where my wife does not tell me that we have to move to Australia. So whenever I do have interactions with people from Australia, I always wonder, will we be interacting in person someday if I make my wife's dreams come true? So Sandy continues, closely followed by The Dark Tower, Doohickey, Under the Dome, Green Mile, Joyland, The Regulators, and The Stand. Both of us maintain it as our favorite King book, minus the "ew, why, Stephen" scene, and we were so excited to see it on Friday night. We both thoroughly enjoyed it. Shameless plug, Emma is an artist and actually painted a scene of the Bowers gang. It's amazing, and if you like it, you can check it out on her Instagram, Emma Falconer Art. I have not checked it out yet, but I definitely will. But listeners, head on over to Emma Falconer Art. We're both holding our breath for announcements, RE, green lighting, casting, and gossip for part 2. It just seems so far away. Anyway, I don't know if it's going to be as far away as we think so. I know that Andy Muscietti and New Line Cinema are going to strike while the iron is hot, and to make sure that they're able to film these kid scenes while these kids are still kids, because they are right now at that moment in their lives where they're going to age very, very quickly. A la Walt in the show Lost, which premiered 13 years ago on this very day. Anyway, in anticipation of your review, the two of us have talked about our likes and dislikes of the film, and I wanted to chuck them your way and see whether you agree or disagree with any of them. Overall, I loved it. There was a perfect balance of supernatural horror with the focus of friendship, which is what I loved about the book. The cast was brilliant, parents included. Bill Skarsgård brought a childish vulnerability to Pennywise that was just beautiful. I'm not going to lie, I personally think that he was better than Tim Curry, but then again, he was always Dr. Frankenfurter, the Cardinal, and Rooster to me before he was Pennywise. Likes. The start when Georgie was afraid to go into the basement to get the paraffin was so good. Straight out of the book, brought tears to my eyes. No OMG, why Stephen scene, just a group hug. Phew. They changed the monsters, but for the better. See also dislikes. I particularly liked the werewolf hands, but I think it would have been enhanced if perhaps Teen Wolf was playing at the cinema and was referenced either by Richie going to see it or being advertised at the cinema. I'm going to piggyback on that. Not only would that have been appropriate, but like I said, I think when I reviewed the It novel in the 3 parts, I mentioned that they could very easily just utilize Thriller, which was such a huge part. It's still a huge part of our culture, but in the 80s, it was everything. That would have been very effective. Holy cow, Beverly's bloody bathroom scene was freaking epic. It was epic. It works. I think that it works because it is so over the top. As I said in my last review, it invokes Nightmare on Elm Street Freddy moments. It's definitely a Nightmare on Elm Street set piece. Just even the way that the hair looks as it wraps around her wrists and her neck. But the blood is so over the top, it's almost a parody. But Sophia Lillis's reaction, again, I watched it and I just watched her reaction of her in the corner, her wide eyes, her inability to speak. It's powerful. She's got some serious acting chops. She was conveying so much emotions. Speaking of which, so like I said earlier with Eddie, when there's a scene of him, it cuts to him very quickly, and the young actor is just, he kind of sobs for a second in his car. It just works so well. The scene where she is wearing Mr. Keen's glasses, and it's like, ugh, so just eerie and gross and grody and disgusting. There is a scene when he turns his back. There is a look that goes over her face. It is so quick, and it's loaded. And I don't know. It's a look that is based on a feeling that I will never know as a guy. So I can't really mansplain it, but I assume it is just like a look like that's disgust and revulsion and sadness that this is what she has to do. This is the effect that she can have. Disappointment in adults. Like, there's just so much there in this one little look that she makes. It's so potent. And then Sandy continues. Giant Pennywise jumping out of the projector screen. I nearly shat myself. That great scene. That garage scene is awesome. I went to the bathroom during the drive-in because I had seen it. I really had to go to the bathroom. And because I had seen so much of that scene already in the trailer and I knew what was going to happen, I made myself go to the bathroom then. I didn't make myself go to the bathroom. I left the car to go to the bathroom to go to the bathroom. I don't know why I'm continuing talking about this, but I made the decision to leave there because I knew that what was going to happen in that scene. So I was very excited to actually sit in the theater and watch that scene play out. And even though I knew what was going to happen, even though so much of it is in the trailer, man, that is a highlight of the film. That is such a good scene. The kids' reactions are great. This is the first time they're actually coming really face-to-face with it. This is them as a group and it as a monster facing off against each other for the first time, and him showing them what they're really dealing with and the way he pops. It is a great scene. So, I kind of was down on the special effects before in some cases, but this is a great use of CGI. I mean, just how large he looks and it is very effective. It is very, very well done. It is both legitimately scary. There is terror and there is tension and there is menace in that scene, but it's also that celebratory, spooky fun that I talked about earlier as well. Richie in the Room of Clowns was so good, and then jumps up Pennywise, beep, beep, Richie. OMG was the most awesome thing in the world, in my opinion. Creep factor 1 billion. Pennywise nearly changing the spider, but not all the way. It was so freaking cool. The Deadlights, wow, yeah, way better than the 1990 miniseries. The kids floating in Pennywise's lair, so freaking cool. Henny Bauer's gang was brilliantly cast, but I would love to see more of them. I would like to have seen more of them. So many Easter eggs. The way the kids wear T-shirts that relate to other SK books. I did see Eddie wearing what I believed it looked like an evil car, which I assume was Christine. I did not see the Dark Tower or Dreamcatcher. I did not see that. I did see a Tracker Brothers Depot t-shirt that Bill was wearing that I liked. Sandy, write back in, or other listeners write back in and tell me what I missed, because I definitely want to know that. But she continues, there's a small clown dressed up as Tim Curry's Pennywise, but it's difficult to pick because it's quite dark in that scene. So as Richie is heading towards the casket in that clown room, to the left by the casket, it is the Tim Curry Pennywise clown. When Eddie breaks his arm, and it's super graphic, I nearly spewed, but it was excellent. LOL. His mum was such a cow. Dislikes. I didn't like that you didn't see Pennywise changing into the monsters that terrorize the kids. For instance, Eddie's leopard didn't really hit home for me. He just seemed to be another junkie squatting in the house on Neibolt Street, not Pennywise. To piggyback on that, I would have kind of liked to see, at some point you do see in the book, this mashup of the clown and the iterations that it takes of the monsters. So I would have liked to have seen, after a certain point, the leper with the like puff balloons on it, or the jingle jangles from this interpretation of Pennywise. Some sort of mashup between these monsters and the clown. Patrick Hockstetter's death was pretty lame. Even though it was spooky for those who didn't know the books, I felt so let down. I agree. His death in the book was disgustingly epic. They should have used it. Nothing like people throwing up in the cinema as proof of a good film. I wasn't really sold on Mike's backstory, and the fact they gave him a bolt to used to kill livestock for butchery, which he used to defeat Pennywise, was irrelevant and unnecessary. Totally detracted from the outcome of the film. They should have used the slugs. See how it should have ended. All of the other child deaths were off screen. The kids were all just missing. This sucked. Where was Eddie? Where was Betty? The only death we saw was Georgie, and as gruesome as it was, it shouldn't have stopped with just that one. I agree. I think that we should have seen more deaths. I think that they did a really good job at establishing that this was a town that was rocked by missing children and presumed dead. The amount of missing child posters was very well done. We saw townspeople putting new posters up. The fact that Betty Ripsom's poster was placed behind Patrick Hockstetter was very unsettling. Very disturbing, just sad. Remember the curfew. So don't get me wrong. Muscietti does a great job at establishing the threat of this town. I just really would have liked to have seen another kid or two get got by it. Okay, basically everything between Beverly getting kidnapped and the group hug. Beverly, they made her the damsel in distress and made me furious. Not only is this a terrible trope, but it is exactly what happens to Audra 27 years later, so now I can't help but wonder why the hell they plan to do with her in the sequel. See how it should have ended. Making Beverly a helpless girl who needed rescuing not only pissed me off no end, because the assumption that women were weak and always need to be saved because they can't do it themselves, but wasted her amazing arc where discovers that she is more than just a sex object. It was important for me that she go through this journey, but she did not. They totally took away the best parts of her story and just made her weak. And then after he captured her and caught her in the deadlights, he just leaves her and walks away. WTF. Leading in from that, the rest of the kids also go through an arc where they find strength in their weaknesses and use this to stamp to Pennywise, defeating it in the sewers in the 1960s, which then leads to my next effing point. Pennywise's death was total crap. They beat it with bloody sticks. Believable if Pennywise was human, but it's not. Pennywise is a supernatural being who was all-powerful. All he had to do was swipe out with them with those half-spider legs, and he would have got them. This was super dumb, and I was absolutely let down, angry by this sloppy writing. See how it should have ended. Also, is Henry Bowers dead? They throw him down the well. If he's dead, it also really changed the sequel. But if he isn't, and Michael C. Hall isn't cast, then I might have a little sulk. How it should have ended. The Silver Slugs. This is why I believe having a werewolf reference in the story was important. Instead of I was a teenage werewolf, Teen Wolf. Okay, so now we're the second person to go with Teen Wolf and not Thriller. Could have been used as a relevant reference, albeit a quirky one given the movie was a comedy, which I believe would have appealed to a 1986 Richie in particular. Sandy, you and I are on the same page. I'm feeling the wavelength here. The kids were old enough that they would have seen it and deduced that to kill a monster, they could try silver bullets, which would be their motivation for melting down Ben's $2 silver and making a couple slugs. Beverly the Marksman. After making their slugs like in the book because they're totally jack of being terrorized, they finally find Georgie dead, and while Bill is grieving for his dead brother, who is all messed up and rotted, there seriously need to be a little more gross out in this film, and everyone's distracted. Pennywise appears and a struggle ensues. Beverly takes a shot, misses, the first slug disappears down a hole or whatever. The deadlights. Bill should have been the one caught in the deadlights instead of Beverly. It also shows that the strong leader of the group can also be weak, considered a target in cut off the head kind of way. He starts mumbling some shit about the turtle, and he thrusts his fists against the post in a nonsensical, disjointed way while he's hypnotized. Just random hypnotic mumbling to those who haven't read the books, but Easter eggs for those of us who have. Pennywise's death. While Bill is floating in the deadlights, Pennywise attacks the other kids. They scuffle a bit. It looks like he's going to win, but after dropping out and losing the second and only remaining slug, Beverly finally desperately takes an aim and hits Pennywise smack in the center of the face. His face starts to crumble and he disappears down the hole to die, instead of just retreating like he did in the movie. Fear? No, it was lame. Okay, so we're starting to get a consensus there with the ending. There should have been a post-credit scene. After the group hug, then get out of the sewer, they make their blood pack in the Barrens, which was awesome. The following should have happened. Fade to black. Key cast credits, i.e. the kids and Bill. Title, Stephen King's It. Open scene, Jackson Street. Almost identical to Georgie coming out at the start of the film. Subtitle, 2017. A boy about Georgie's age steps out of his house in a yellow slicker. He looks down the street with a smile and places a remote control speedboat in a swollen gutter and runs after it as it zooms down the stormwater. He dodges under two yellow safety barricades, not hitting his head, and continues after the boat. The camera follows behind the boat as it approaches Georgie's drain. The camera stops when it reaches it, and we continue to observe as the boat and the boy continue down the street without issue. The camera turns left and looks down the drain, which is dark and has moved focus off them, and then pans down the drain, zooms in the darkness. Pennywise's eyes appear. Cut to black. Subtitle, end of part 1. The audience gasps, OMG, there's more? End. Unfortunately, though, this didn't happen, and I have to settle with only it happening in my imagination. But how cool would that have been? I do agree. I really agree. I really like that. I really wish that there was a post-credit scene. And we live in an age where that's kind of becoming more and more the rule. And we knew that New Line Cinema knew that this was going to be a hit. They were very, very confident in it, in its promotion. And it was tracking very well. It wasn't tracking with the numbers that it's getting. I mean, no one really could have expected it to be. I mean, this is beating summer blockbusters. This is a summer blockbuster hit in the fall. And so no one really predicted that. But they predicted it enough to be a hit enough to warrant a sequel. So I think they should have leaned into that. So I agree with you completely. Sandy continues, a shame I'm not a Hollywood scriptwriter, haha. I could have made the Dark Tower screenplay with more than toilet paper if it was scribbled on. It's so funny that I think every email I've read has mentioned The Dark Tower being a terrible movie. Anyway, that's short. Haha, 3-page summary of my thoughts on the film. I can't wait to hear your review. Long days and pleasant nights. Sandy from Canberra, Australia. Thank you, Sandy. Great email. Write in again if you should feel so. Evan writes, constant reader, I think that I got a review on iTunes as you requested. Again, I think that your podcast is brilliant. It was great in my view. I only have one thought that I cannot get out of my head, and I was wondering your point of view. First, I totally agree with you that King relies too much on the N-word to articulate racism. It has a lot of it. It, however, is the first of King's novels to really take on race in a significant way and not just a characteristic of a nasty character. Racism and homophobia are included by King as a part of the sickness in Derry. Mike had a couple important roles in the book. One is as the historian, although this is all done between the timelines. As I recall, Mike started his historical research around 1980 or so. I do not remember the kids having much historical awareness except through the photo album or Mike's visit to the Ironworks ruins. Of course, this historian role is given to Ben in the film. Mike is also there was a way to introduce some of these racial issues. It is through him we get the story of the black spot. The jealousy among poor whites towards upwardly mobile blacks was a big part of racial violence throughout American history. I think Nancy McLean's book on the Klan talks some about how they targeted mostly upwardly mobile black farmers, but pretty much any good book on racial violence gets this point. So the Butch Bowers William Hanlon conflict seems true to me. And Butch passing his racism onto his son has reflections as well throughout history. People brought their children to racially motivated lynchings, after all. Overall, I think that the racial issues were handled very well in the novel and emerge as a very brilliant way for King to connect the themes of maturation to the very real history of racial violence. I am kind of thinking about the Wendigo in Pet Sematary, which seems to connect the genocide of the Native Americans. Great interpretation. On the one hand, I get avoiding some of this in the film considering the growing awareness of police violence towards black Americans, but this begs the question, why make Butch a police officer? When this was revealed, I thought, okay, this makes sense with the movie set 2 years before Rodney King beaten. The film writers and directors certainly did not shy away from child abuse and bullying. They also got the adults' indifference right in general, but none of them seemed particularly racist or homophobic. Not the place that would be home to the main legion of white decency or fill up the kissing bridge with anti-gay graffiti. I wonder if King in the novel wanted to critique the boomers a bit for growing up down with the struggle, but then opposing school busing in Boston when they were all grown with mortgages. I will need to see the movie again, but I think the Black Spot was mentioned as an African-American club, not that it was burned down by essentially the Klan. It was mentioned that it was burned down, but I believe they said a cult, like an all-white cult. Whatever they said, it kind of took me out for a second. Like, I didn't quite understand what they were going for. As I recall, the suggestion in the film that was all it's doing. In my reading of the novel, the burning of the Black Spot, the Bradley gang murder, the lynching of Claude Hero, and the related labor violence are reflections of its evil in the town. In those cases, it is a bystander. I agree, yes. As you probably know, the murder of Adrian Mellon was based on the murder of Charlie Howard, which took place in Bangor while King was writing it. I think it would be a mistake if Part 2 wrote this out. I agree. That said, it has to be done right. 2017 is not 1985, and the homophobia of our time will look different than what King put on the page. I do agree, but at the same time, I don't agree. I wonder if Adrian Mellon should be revised to not necessarily be gay, but to be transgender. And I believe that that would speak to the level of homophobia that we are facing today and be much more relevant to the topic that that we seem to be discussing of late. I do not think any of this takes away... Yeah, I mean, like, start out at a bar and have a transgender character coming out of a bathroom. I think that would be the way to go. And then having the attackers watch this character come out of a bathroom that they have deemed to be like very gender specific, and then they follow the character to the kissing bridge, rough the character up, throw the character over the bridge. I think that would be a very 2017 specific, 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19 specific situation. So I do not want to think that this takes away from what is a great film and an effective adaptation. I do think that what King did with Derry's history of racial and homophobic violence is one of the things that turned a great horror novel into a great work of American literature. Best, Evan. Evan, thank you for your very spot-on thoughts and deep analysis of the heart of the horror that King was able to capture in his 1986 novel. And then we have Sarah, who writes, I just wanted to send a quick email as I finished your 3-part It review. I held off listening and until I actually finished the book myself. I'm a huge Stephen King fan, but shockingly, I'd never read It. I'd never even seen the miniseries. I'm not entirely sure what put me off of it, but once I knew that the movie was being released this year, I knew I had to read it. I put down Mr. Mercedes and purchased It. Good choice! It took me a while to finish It, somewhat due to its length, this coming from someone who has read The Stand multiple times, but also due to its content. Not just the horror from Pennywise, but the interludes, the abuse Bev suffered at the hands of her father, the racism, the bullying. It's a heavy book. I finished it after 2 months on Sunday after hiding from my kids and husband for about 2 hours. I listened to your 3-part review this week, and I have to say I agreed with a lot of what you said. Ben not having much of a purpose, although to be fair, he did get rid of its baby eggs. Eddie being asexual and perhaps gay. I get the feeling that when he died, touching Richie's face, trying to find the words to say to Richie, but dying as he contemplated them, I found that to be such an intimate scene and wondered, maybe? The sex scene being completely unnecessary and out of character for all of them. I feel like yes. Some of the content could have been trimmed down, but ultimately, I'm glad that it wasn't. Though yes, I could have done without the sewer sex. Bev was more than that. I'm also glad to see that they didn't combine characters in the film because 7 seemed to be a magic number, as 7 is a magic number, and that felt important somehow. Also, I have to say that the end struck me rather unexpectedly. It made me rather emotional. There's something so relatable about having these childhood friends you did everything with, and then as adults, forgetting them. One of King's quotes that remains one of my favorites. I never had any friends later on like the ones I had when I was 12. Jesus, does anyone? So many of your formative years are spent with these people, and then you grow up and grow apart and begin to forget. For me, the kids were the heart of the book, and I probably shouldn't have waited so long to read it, but I'm so glad that I did now. I'm seeing the film tomorrow night, so I'll be interested to hear how you liked it once you release your review. Thanks for a great podcast. I'm a happy subscriber, Sarah. Sarah, thank you for writing in. Thank you for reading it. These are great thoughts. I'm glad that you got a lot out of the book. I hope you liked the movie. And then Sarah, I don't know if it's the same Sarah, I'm not quite sure, writes for fan casting. I wanted people to fan cast the sequel. If you could get adult actors to play these characters, who would you get? All right, this is all the rage right now, so I want to hear your thoughts. I've been on record saying that I want Bill Hader as Richie. I want Jessica Chastain as Bev. Everyone else I really haven't thought about too much. I was really trying to fan cast as I was watching maybe Jesse Eisenberg, I don't know, as Stan. The actor who was playing Stan as a kid, like there's an actor as an adult that I right at the tip of my tongue, and I can't quite picture him. Is it Jesse Eisenberg? I'm not sure. Would it have been Anton Yelchin? I'm not sure. Eddie, I don't know. I'm trying to think about Bill. Who would Bill be? Like, I was like watching Bill. I'm like, who does that guy look like? Is it a young Tobey Maguire? Could Tobey pull this off? I don't know. But very interested to see what you guys have to say about who could play these characters as adults. So Sarah writes, a part of me hopes they go for lesser known actors. But she continues, Bill, Patrick Wilson. Sarah, all for it. Huge Patrick Wilson fan. And Patrick Wilson has his bona fides in the horror genre. All right. He has The Conjuring. He has Insidious. He's got that James Wan cred right there. Another thing about Patrick Wilson. Underrated comedic actor. Those of you who have not seen the A-Team, a lot of people didn't. Look, this is a missed opportunity for a franchise, guys. Joe Carnahan's A-Team is a great movie. It is a really solid action movie with a great comedic and villainous turn by Patrick Wilson. I'm not even joking. I'm not being sarcastic. I'm not being facetious. I'm being dead on. You know, Patrick Wilson tends to play the more straight-laced characters, and he plays that character very, very well. But he also does comedy very well. Go watch the A-Team. I would love to see him as Bill. Bev, obvious choice, Jessica Chastain. Second choice, Bryce Dallas Howard. I said very much the same thing in my last review. Ben, Jeremy Renner. Interesting choice. Wouldn't have thought it. Jeremy Renner would be good. Mike, Chadwick Boseman. Dude can do no wrong. All right? Chadwick Boseman oozes cool. I would love to see him as Mike. Stan, Hugh Dancy. Yeah, I also can see Hugh Dancy as Patrick Wilson. I mean, when I picture Hugh Dancy, I just picture the trembling Will from Hannibal, just always on the verge of a breakdown. So I definitely see why it's Stan, but I also see a strength in that in that actor that I can see him as Bill. Eddie, Charlie Cox. It's funny that you say that for Eddie because I can see him as Bill because he has that leadership quality. But let him flex his acting muscles, because I don't quite see him as Eddie, but hey, I'm not gonna rule that out. Richie, Bill Hader. We're in agreement there. Henry Bowers, Sam Rockwell. Also, I'm interjecting, Sam Rockwell could play Richie. That's another thought. But Henry Bowers as Sam Rockwell, he would be great because he can play unhinged very, very well. So thank you, Sarah, for writing in. Mark writes, and I've seen this before, what Mark is about to say. The only person I want cast is Seth Green. I personally think that would be great for him to reprise his role as Richie Tozer. I'm sure there will be more popular picks for an adult Richie, but I would like to see someone from the original TV series in one of the new movies. Just my 2 cents. So, Mark, thank you for writing in for that. I've seen that echoed in some places before. So, guys, I'm now over 2 hours. My last episode was over an hour, so now we're approaching 3.5 hours of me talking about 2017's It. And I'm going to put a pin in it now. So there are some emails that I have not read. I will read in my next episode. And if you are listening to this and have not written in about just your thoughts on it or fan casting, I want more fan casting. These were really good examples of fan casting that are going to get me thinking. Feel free to write in at stephenkingcast@yahoo.com. And a couple of you mentioned writing into iTunes, which would really help me out. In the last year, there has been an increase in Stephen King podcasts, and I really would like to see my podcast continue to be in the top searched podcasts, and the best way to do that is iTunes subscriptions and iTunes reviews. So if you do listen and have not written a review to iTunes, guys, you could really help me out by just spending a minute or two writing a review on iTunes. That would continue to keep the Stephen King cast towards the top of the Stephen King search on iTunes.
Hey, it's me tagging in from 2026. Listening to all these episodes again and doing my re-edits, it's crazy to me that this entire time for over a decade I always said iTunes instead of Apple Podcasts. So I'm sorry for that ongoing chronic remark, but the plea still stands true. If you do have any time on your hands, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or any of the podcast platforms that you use to listen to the Stephen King cast, because now we have Stephen King cast on Spotify, on YouTube, on Amazon, on Pandora, on SoundCloud. It's all over the place. So you can find it in multiple places, and just leaving a review would be awesome. Thank you. You can always write into stephenkingcast@yahoo.com and follow me on Blue Sky, TikTok, Instagram, and on Facebook. All right, everyone, that's all that I have. I hope that you enjoyed, and I'll see you around next time where MOON spells Stephen King Cast.